I know that for many of you, we might be the last step between you and happy hour. So we know that you're all exhausted, and so we're really excited to have this conversation because we're really on the precipice of a new era of higher education. And so we're actually going to start with a brief history lesson. But before we do, I'm Bethany Weigele. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of EdPlus at Arizona State University. And I'm really excited to be talking with my colleagues here and partners on enabling technologies for the future of higher education. And so by way of brief introduction, really the first enabling technology of higher education was the printing press. And the ability to take what used to be a sage imparting wisdom to the people at his feet transitioned into something that could be scaled by printing out that knowledge and shared across the world. The internet age was the next. It revolutionized how we could provide access to education. And then came personalized adaptive learning, and we're sitting really on the era of what might change with artificial intelligence with a new level of sophistication, and I'm sure you guys have all been talking about that. But I'm joined here from a variety of different backgrounds and institutions and how they bring technology to their customers and learners across the world. And so I'm really excited to hear from them all in this discussion. So if you would, panelists, please introduce yourself, the institution you hail from, and that institution's kind of fundamental beliefs of technology, how it should be used for technology, and how it's impacted the learners to date. So I'll start with you, Smita.
Great. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Smita Bakshi. I'm the Senior Vice President of Academic Learning at Wiley. And I'm also the co-founder of a company called Zybooks that we sold to Wiley in 2019. Wiley actually started with the printing press in 1807. So, and over 200 years, over these 200 years, it is primarily a digital company now, with about 85% of its sales coming from digital sources, digital platforms. So, it's really seen the impact of technology. I developed my love for EdTech. I really didn't know EdTech till we started Zybooks. I was in the software industry. And I developed my love and passion and saw its impact really starting from the ground up, working with computer science students at the higher ed level. My belief in terms of technology and the impact it has is that if it's done right and if it's used right, then the way it can impact, the sort of unparalleled impact that it can have on learner success, on academic success, eventually career success, is just phenomenal. Like, there's no other way, no institution, no amount of funding that can get education to work at scale the way enabling technologies can. And I'll just say one more thing, and by done right, I mean it really should provide a fantastic, beautiful user experience for the learner, but be really powerful underneath, under the hood, but with technologies and tools and be data-driven and so on. And then fit within the ecosystem. It needs to be priced right, and it needs to have accessibility and everything that we speak about. It's not easy to do, but once you get that right, you can scale it. And I believe in doing I'll speak a lot about from a learner's perspective because that's where my experience is. But I think those principles apply whether it's higher ed or talent space or K-12. Those same principles apply.
Chris?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Bennett. I'm Commercial Director at Cambridge University Press, which is part of Cambridge University Press and Assessment, which is part of the University of Cambridge. You might possibly have heard of us. We've been around almost exactly the same length of time as the printing press, referencing Bethany's previous comment. But I'd encourage you not to think of us as you might in those terms. We are challenging ourselves as part of the University of Cambridge to use technology in education to make changes that really drive and evidence improved student outcomes today. We've shaken the world of research by moving to an open research model for almost everything we do, and we're looking to do something very similar with higher ed, moving from a traditional content publishing model to a publishing as a service model and through partnership to really achieve the improvements to the student experience that Smita has just described. We are a global organization, but one of the things that we've noticed that technology brings is how very differently students learn in different parts of the world, and how poorly, in fact, we've been skilled up to deliver for those different types of learning and different types of student experience. So there's a big part there for us to really build from, and we'll talk a bit more about why our partnership with ASU and others is important in that context.
Joseph?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Joseph Nsengimana. I'm the director of the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in ICT at the Mastercard Foundation. So the center is basically focusing on Africa exclusively, and we seek to harness the power of technology to improve learning outcome. The Mastercard Foundation itself has a mission to improve the life of young people. And the foundation believes that education is the biggest lever you can pull to improve the life of those young people. And so we come at it from an education perspective. And so we don't look at it from an education, technology as for its own sake. Is what do we use it for? And so we want to make sure that in order to guarantee that the young people are educated and are empowered and enabled to improve their own lives, the lives of their communities, that we use all available tools. And technology is one of the major tools we can actually use to do that. And so that's how we look at it. We partner with various other entities, universities, and other partners to ensure that that actually happens. So I look forward to this conversation.
Great, thank you so much. And so you guys mentioned kind of the quality that you need to provide with that technology, that state-of-the-art student experience, the fundamental belief that technology can deliver even higher quality to a larger amount of students. And those are almost the rubrics, I think, that we have at ASU for technology. We will not deploy it if it doesn't provide as good, if not better, outcomes than we can in person. And I think we all kind of share that ethos of fundamental beliefs. And yet, there's still barriers to adoption, right? We create great products. We even have data that demonstrates that success. Chris, I'll start with you in terms of what are those barriers to adoption? Why aren't these great quality products that perform just as well as in person not getting adopted? And what tactics have you used to kind of overcome those barriers to make sure that the best quality technologies are being deployed and given to learners for their benefit?
I think one answer, and there are lots of answers to that question, but one is that the one-size-fits-all or linear learning journey that's traditionally been adopted and delivered through the textbook, and particularly the use of a core textbook in teaching, it doesn't deliver those differences. It's a one-size-fits-all. It's a work from one end of the course to the other using what's in the textbook. And if you struggle, if you've got no path to remediation, if you don't learn, and I can say personally with mathematics, I struggled because I didn't have options available to me until a brilliant teacher gave me the context. And I think that's true of so many students. Students who are from different demographics, who think differently, who learn differently, and are not being served by a traditional publishing textbook-based model. 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, we acquired a company called Cogbooks. Cogbooks is an adaptive learning edtech platform, and one of the things that really appealed to us about Cogbooks was that it was subject agnostic. That it didn't just take the students down a prescribed path, it gave them different options. It allowed them to remediate when they struggled. It worked really well with different types of learning. And we thought at last, because to Bethany's point, so many products on the market were born, and there's nothing wrong with this, but they were born out of a particular pedagogy or a particular subject area, and they don't translate very well to different subjects and different learning types. Cogbooks, we felt, did, and there was an opportunity there to really shake up what has been a traditional market for us and other publishers and do something completely different, building modular short courses in conjunction with other universities, ASU, the principal partner in that endeavour in mathematics, which is traditionally also a Cambridge strength. So we looked at something that was a strength of ours in the formal mould that Bethany's described, and we said, how can we really improve this? How can we make connections across math learning from the age of 3 all the way up into professional life? And across our schools and higher education organisations, that's what we've been attempting to do through the medium of adaptive learning. It's a long road, and in partnership with ASU, we've learned a lot so far along the way. We're a long way from the finish line yet, but we're seeing a very different mode of mathematics teaching and learning, still with the professor at its heart, but allowing students to work at their own pace, to work at their own way, to remediate, and have different learning journeys to take. And I think that's the best answer I can give to Bethany's question.
Yeah. Well, there definitely is a variety of barriers to adoption, and I think our different seats might lend to a variety of different answers. Joseph, what's your take on the barriers to adoption? You create these you find these great tech tools, and yet they aren't deployed. Why not, and how can we help?
Thanks, Bethany. I think Chris touched on this, is a lot of these technologies tend to be developed as one size fits all. It's like you're developing a solution for a specific community, a specific country, a specific reality, and then you assume that it's going to work everywhere. So just to give an example, if you design a solution which is the greatest solution, has AI embedded in it, but it's a 5G, and then you go deploy somewhere they don't have 4G. So it's a great product, but it can't be used there. So it's useless. So, I mean, it's very important to understand the context where these technologies are being used and make sure that they fit the reality on it. This is why we work with a lot of local entrepreneurs, local companies that understand the reality on the ground, and they tend to come up with solutions that actually work. You know, they might not be the most sophisticated solution, but they are the solutions that work. And so as we develop these technologies, I think we need to be mindful of the fact that they need to vary from context to context. And I think that's one. The other thing is just being, pragmatic. We do have infrastructure issues across different communities, particularly on a continent in Africa where we work. There are some areas where you really do have infrastructure issues that need to be dealt with. So you might not have internet everywhere. You might have 3G that is predominantly in most areas, but they don't have 5G yet, right? So we need to sort of like be mindful of those kind of things as we create technology to be used in those areas.
That's great. I think flexibility to that standpoint of not just how we design for the learner, but how we design for the author and the instructor and how they're going to leverage that technology. And so we often encounter the barrier to adoption at ASU by the faculty being worried about this new technology or a faculty being worried that the technology will replace them. And yet we've been on a 20-year journey with President Crow at ASU and haven't lost any faculty. We've quadrupled our size and we've scaled how those faculty can deliver to more and more students, but we still haven't seen technology replacing our faculty. And so, one of our strategies has actually been to welcome the first early adopters, those self-select of, I believe in online education, I believe I can bring this online, and overcome adoptions by then enabling those faculty to become the influencers of other faculty to, wait, physics brought their program online. It was actually the first STEM program that ASU brought on, and I think it led to biology and chemistry being like, we will absolutely not be beat by physics. And so changing the paradigm by which you roll out your systems. Smita, I'm wondering how those barriers how you see flexibility as one of those barriers, and what other barriers to adoption you saw when you deployed zyBooks and with Wiley now.
Yeah, definitely. I mentioned that the system needs to be easy to use yet powerful, and that powerful comes in providing a fair amount of flexibility, not necessarily being able to customize everything. Like, we have strong beliefs in pedagogy, and we believe some things should be customizable and others should not. So having that level of flexibility is a way to overcome barriers, and especially when you have a large online institution like ASU and so on, is making sure that they're not fitting to our solution, but rather we are fitting to their specific needs. But starting off as an ed tech entrepreneur, the biggest barriers I found was how distributed this education ecosystem is. There are, 5,000 colleges in just the US alone, just looking at it just from a US perspective. There are 5,000. We want to sell into about 2,000 of them. There are hundreds of thousands of instructors, each with his or her own viewpoint. And as a result, there's sort of so much of awareness we need to bring. People do it with the best of intentions. But there were instructors. There was one time we were at UMD speaking with an instructor for MATLAB, and he had a line of students outside his door, and he said, "You've come to talk to me about technology. I believe in the blackboard and chalk." Right? And he did. He really did. And so it's like, so the academic freedom is a great thing, and we should have academic freedom, but that's a barrier to adoption as well. And then everything else that Chris and James mentioned, absolutely. Like, even just from a zyBooks perspective, like, why can't we get zyBooks into Africa and into India? It's not a great fit, but why not? Like, we have to try to uncover and figure that out. Yeah.
So I think each of you kind of mentioned this importance of listening, right? If you become the sage that knows what that particular audience needs, you can't design for all simultaneously, but you can create flexible technology. And if you listen to those various audiences and experts, you can create something much more widely distributable. I want to kind of hold on to that and focus a little bit more on some of those insights of the importance of listening to be able to deliver to the right context, to serve in and design in a DEI way. How is tech involved in there? And in some cases, I think historically tech might have hurt and created some of those achievement gaps. How are you all designing to prevent that? Designing to serve underrepresented students and close that achievement gap? And how can you design in a way that it would actually provide better outcomes and lead to serving those learners, in addition to listening so that you can incorporate those things in your design? Joseph, would you mind kind of adding into that lens, working in so many different countries?
It's a good point. Actually, this ties into what we were talking about earlier. If you think about technology, I think sometimes this conversation seems to kind of move from a conversation about education into a conversation about technology, right? And that's really one of the challenges we have. Because if I'm an instructor, if I'm in a university or I'm an education institution, and I know that I'm thinking about education, I'm going to say, what can help me deliver education? What can help me under the circumstance that I live in to actually achieve my objective, which is about education? But if I start talking about technology in the vacuum, then I'm just thinking about acquiring some technologies. And that technology doesn't necessarily align with what I'm doing. An example I can give you is that we talk about infusing technology in higher education. And so all these higher education will say, I want to create courses that are going to be online. But he's a professor, he's not an instructional designer, doesn't understand technology. They do understand their subject matter, they're a subject matter expert. But they're trying to create a course. They don't have the skills necessary to do that, but they say, no, I have to do technology, I have to use technology. And so I think that when we need to be careful, we need to talk about education. How does education help you? How can you use the other resources within the university, within the institution to help you, so you don't feel this pressure that you have to just go online, with all the with all the lack of expertise that you have, but you just have to do it. So I think that's how we need to approach this and look at it that way. And I think from that point of view, I think it's going to line up. We're going to make sure that I am trying to deliver education. I need to find everything around me that helps me do that. I'm not just acquiring technology so that I can say I have technology in my institution.
Yeah, partnership becomes really key, not only for those who might use and adopt what it is you're producing, but with those who have different strengths and skills and abilities and knowledge of those contexts. So I think just incredibly important piece of not only listening, but partnering with those who have the expertise that you don't have allows us to design technology in these various contexts. And so just as an example, ASU coming straight into Africa and assuming that we know what it is that is needed wouldn't work. So when we partnered with Mastercard Foundation on their social learning platform, we designed mock-ups and there were lots of questions. What will this button do? What will this button do? What will the course be? And we kept saying over and over again, we're going to let the students tell us. Like, it depends on what the students think that button will do. That's what we'll design. And so they chose mentorship and they chose an opportunities board as our feature sets. And so that ability to listen and then to lead and to have the right partners in the room with us to guide that development. Smita, tell us about the journey with zyBooks and how that context informed how you were designing. Like, is computer science one size fits all, or how do you design for different audiences?
Yeah, I do think that the achievement gap, it can be reduced, and powerful technologies can substantially reduce the achievement gap. So within zyBooks, as an example, we started off with this concept of we'll have text, and then we'll include some animations, and so on. And then we realized that even that short paragraph of text, students were not reading it. Like, we would look to see what they did, and they would skip straight to the first interactive element. And then we did some experiments, and we found that they spend more time reading less text. It's counterintuitive. If you give a paragraph of text, they will spend less time on that paragraph than they will on 2 lines of text. So that's kind of what we adopted into the pedagogy, is have just 1 or 2 sentences to explain the concept and jump straight into an activity. And these are there's nothing wrong with reading, but we realize that that's how students are best learning the material. And I would say that that's a principle that we have kept and we use a lot of data as well, so we can see where the struggle is happening. And I think that there's looking at all the clicks and seeing, okay, these are activities that are tripping students up and going back and then reinforcing this, going back to the author team and saying, okay, you need to shore up this. So our research has shown that those achievement gaps really can be substantially reduced, and they can be, like the lowest quartile gets up to almost the average of the class. And then I just wanted to mention as well is that as times have changed, that listening skill is so important. When COVID first happened, we really had to throw out our roadmap. We had a pretty, robust roadmap that we were confident on, and we realized, oh, we have all of these instructors now who have never used online before, who are now willing to use it, and assessments are becoming even more important. Integrity is becoming even more important. So we really had to kind of listen to the context and to learners and to instructors and saying, hey, provide me a way of being able to grade differentiate. I need to be able to differentiate my A student from a B student in an environment where things have moved 100% online very quickly. So yeah, lots of ways I could go on for a long time in terms of how the achievement gaps can be reduced, but I think they're powerful ways of doing that.
Yeah, customization in particular for those learners and doing those studies to make sure you're designing for them You brought up the pandemic, and I'm sure many of you in the room know this, but last year the NAEP scores came out, and we had lost 20 years of progress in math proficiency due to the pandemic. And so the scores from 2003, every advancement in proficiency was lost. And when you break down those numbers, the US sits around 30% efficiency for 8th grade math. And if you break it down by underrepresented minority groups, it's almost half. So they're in the teens in terms of math proficiency. And so as we design these things, as we design our components, taking that data into account and choosing to focus on those issues. Chris, I'm wondering if you'll share a bit more about why math is so important at Cambridge University Press, and how in particular technologies could enhance and serve those students better. That'd be great.
Sure, and actually it's a nice segue from what you were just saying, because we ran a global research project which actually concluded its first 5-year phase in the first year of the pandemic. And it was as I say, it was a global view. We had a massive amount of data collected on how students from ages 3 to 19 study mathematics across the world, different communities, different backgrounds, different experiences. And what that told us about the nature of mathematics education and how poorly or inconsistently we were serving those needs. And certainly one of the things we've seen very clearly is that pandemic dip unquestionably was there, but we also saw that that we could make those connections, that we could make evidence-based, and I'm going to keep reinforcing this, be evidence-based about this, because you can come back to exactly how people learn. And we built this out with a nodal system, which we call the Cambridge Mathematics Framework, and it has thousands of nodes, and it can give you routes, pedagogical routes, through mathematics learning. And it's entirely evidence-based, and it told us some things that we just didn't expect to see, and that we are failing and turning off a great many students at very, very young ages who are straight away, they're getting mathematics fear, they're going into the education system instinctively switched off from maths. And we said, well, we can do something about this. And that was how the Cambridge Mathematics Framework was born, and it's worth having a look at the website. So a lot of the evidence that backs up the work we've done is on that website, and you can see just how we can design for the success of different students from that project. And it won't be the only subject for which this holds true, but of course we have such a global challenge with mathematics. It was the one, to Bethany's question, it was the one we wanted to start with. And when Cogbooks came in, there was a natural fit there, and with the partnership with ASU. So it was a confluence of things that came together for us.
And I think uniquely in the pandemic and uniquely in math, I'm sure there are others as well, but very specifically, the content tops on top of each other. And so we lost that entire last quarter of when the pandemic closed everything down, and then started school back up with, okay, I hope you know what you were supposed to know from that last quarter, because you needed that. And so we've seen teachers over and over again try to fill in those learning losses, but they don't have the time. They have to teach to that particular grade. And in an ideal world, we'd have enough teachers that know math, we'd have enough humans, I think, that don't have math anxiety, that know math, that could help every learner one-on-one. But we don't have those resources, both financially or just brain power. And that's, I think, where technology becomes so essential. If we can mimic that one-on-one experience and provide and fill in those learning losses, I think that's part of why ASU too is focused on math. Of even pre-pandemic, we know that there are learning losses. We know that you have to remember what happened last year. You might not. And our data actually shows that the best ed tech that's out there can't fill in those learning losses. It doesn't know if you got this calculus problem because you didn't understand this first concept or if you didn't understand something from 3 or 4 years ago. And so having technology that could diagnose what the actual learning loss is and then fill it in. You talked originally about needing these, adaptive, personalized pathways and not a one-size-fits-all. It's incredibly important for underrepresented learners because if they get the tech that knows you got it right, you got it wrong, oh, you got it wrong too many times, go back 3 modules. If they get that more often, the barrier to achievement is going to be even higher because they have been sent back and have to do twice as many modules, right? And so that sophistication of diagnosing a learner's problem at scale and at a cost much more cheap than what a one-on-one tutor would be is just incredibly important.
And if we can scale that, and if we can put a machine learning layer across all of that data, we will learn how to iterate, we will learn how to teach better and better and to learn better and better. And that really is the ultimate end game here. We're at the first step at the moment, and we're actually struggling to catch up. We're catching students already too late with the mathematics project we're doing, but at least we'll have a point where they transition from high school into college or university, and we know that we can get them up to a point where they have some consistency of experience, and they have much greater confidence going into their subject area with mathematics.
And it's certainly not only math. There's just so many challenges to overcome. And I think, Smita, your example of like just changing the amount of text and listening to the learners, right? I'm sure that has benefited all learners, but English language learners and those who are nervous and take more time for them to read. You've alleviated a barrier in that subtle design change. And how do we get that data and that information into the hands of the people who are in charge of the tech to take each one of those incremental design changes and ensure that it's broadly valuable for the learners. Which now we've spent so much time just thinking about how we can mimic humans in our technology and lower the cost, not replace humans. We all know that. It's a very interesting time to be in the education space with the leaps and bounds that artificial intelligence has done in the last few months. And so I don't think many GSV attendees are part of the prescriptive fear of academic integrity, and that's the #1 thing we should be thinking about artificial intelligence. I know there are a variety of things for us to be considering as we bring AI into the classroom, but tell me more about how is AI going to be brought in? What are the concerns or what are the signature moments that you're evaluating and making sure? And where are the opportunities there? The viewpoint of AI, because there's really pros and cons, but it's so much more than academic integrity worry. Smita, will you begin?
Yeah, definitely there's opportunity and threat, and I'm more excited by the opportunity than worried about the threat. I mean, there's not a threat, but we have to change how we do things, right? If you can copy-paste your assessments and put it into ChatGPT and get an A, which is, by the way, we did that. We took our Intro to Python Zybook and had a student put in all of the assessments that someone has sat and spent tons of effort in putting programming assignments, put them on ChatGPT, and that student got a B+, and with a little bit more work, they got an A. So we as a provider, we have to do something different, right? So I believe, but I was thinking about this is when you had paper, you kind of wrote books in a certain way, and then the internet came along, and the first thing we did was we took PDFs, or we took videos, and we put them online, and that's not necessarily really leveraging the internet, right? That's not leveraging the web. And then, some more years later, there was good, powerful technologies that leveraged the web that really did great, fantastic, interactive content. And so I think we are at an inflection point where you can take what we've done for the web and bring in AI, but I think those will be sort of more incremental. So one of the applications, for instance, is in this adaptive space, is can we use AI to automatically generate what the intervention would be, right? Can we do that? But I do think that that's more in the sort of incremental space. I don't know what the next thing will be, but I do believe we shouldn't be retrofitting, but rather really figuring out how do you best leverage this new technology. I don't know what it is, but I believe that's the direction it should go. And just like we went from paper to the internet, is just come up with new ways of doing things.
Not a one-to-one translation, absolutely.
No, not necessarily.
Joseph, what is Mastercard and the Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning talking about these days with artificial intelligence?
I think, for me, I agree with you completely. I'm more excited about the opportunities than the fear itself. I think it's going to help personalize learning. It's what you were talking about earlier. If I'm working with my assignments, it would be able to detect areas that I don't understand and direct me to how I can actually go and fill those gaps. And I think so, by and large, it would help, I think. At least that's my conviction. However, with that, also we have to understand there's some work to be done, right? AI is relying on the existing body of work, the data that exists today. And we know that data, in the age of internet and social media, it's all over the place, right? So the machine is learning, but what is it learning? And how accurate is that? Mm-hmm. And so that, to me, that's the worrisome. It's more like, how do we make sure that the data is accurate that's feeding this? Mm-hmm. And then how do we eliminate the biases within this data set? Those are the concerns. But overall, I think that there is more opportunities than fear for my part.
Absolutely. I just asked it to solve a system of linear equations problem, and it very confidently gave me the wrong answer. But that will probably be a completely different story in 3 months, given how much it's advanced. And so at ASU, we have fully embraced that the world of work has AI in it, and now everyone has an assistant in their pocket, and we have to teach students and learners how to use that appropriately. Last week I got a cover letter written by ChatGPT, and they forgot to change the text. And so we haven't helped that learner know how to leverage AI in the world of work. I think they have wrongfully assumed that it will replace humans, and it's going to be a fascinating question. What's the talk over at Cambridge University Press and Assessments on AI?
Well, as with all companies in the sector, we're looking at it right now and wondering what we're going to do. We are really excited about the opportunity here because, as Bethany's just said, an arms race is going to develop here really quickly. It's reminiscent for me of almost 20 years ago when open access first became a buzzword. And people were saying, there are enormous implications for academic freedom, and we don't want this material out there, and there's going to be plagiarism, and there'll be vanity publishing, and all the rest of it. What's happened is greater accessibility to and greater equity of research data around the world. And I think the impact of this is going to be very, very similar. We're excited to use the tools, and to Joseph's point, there's a huge opportunity here to improve student outcomes because the machine can learn how people learn and make their experiences better. Almost as soon as ChatGPT started being used for plagiarism, it's also been used to create anti-plagiarism tools. It's a good example of just how quickly this is moving along. So this is going to be a benefit to education. It's going to have some significant implications that we'll have to manage very carefully, but we can educate for that. And let's not lose sight of that.
Well, I can certainly imagine what the conversations will be next year at GSV, but I don't think we can even predict it. So I'm excited to continue the conversation with all of our GSV attendees on what education looks like with the technology as it advances in this next year. Will you please help me thank my panelists for this conversation?